I know it's frustrating for sure. Eventually, it'll
Yeah.
maybe become old hat. But I'm so glad that you joined, and I feel privileged and honored for you to be a part of this. Um, this is Ivan McDonald. Again, he's the community engagement lead for the nonprofit organization Montana Racial Equity Project. Can you tell us more about yourself, Ivan, and what you do to, in the Indigenous community in particular, advocate for missing and murdered Indigenous women?
Yeah. So actually, I met Hisheeya a few years ago. A lot of it was related to the work that I do with my sister Ivy. About 3 or 4 years ago, my sister and I started documenting the stories of the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls crisis within the state of Montana. It was in relation to our own family's history, with some instances of missing and murdered loved ones that we've had. And it just kind of began as this small project. We did a short film. It was while I was in grad school at the University of Montana. And from there, just it kind of just gained traction. And we're currently we're in production for our first feature length, it's titled When They Were Here.
When
And
they were here.
yeah, and so that we're hoping, we're in a pretty good place as far as hopefully starting production soon. We did have to stop that once the pandemic started, but we hope
Right.
that with the godsend of the vaccine, that we'll probably be able to start pretty soon. But we've done some other work. We did a short with ESPN, Blackfeet Boxing, Not Invisible, and yeah, have just been really focused on trying to highlight the voices of the people, the family, and the communities that we work from, and our work with, and are from.
What compelled you and your sister to advocate for that
Yeah,
and
yeah.
make
So you,
and create these projects?
yeah. So it was. I think it was right around the time Ashley Lauren Heavy Runner, who's a relative of mine, went missing. And I had been tasked with a project in grad school to kind of do this community engagement, this kind of community education project. And I was like, well, this is something that's happening on my reservation. And, just kind of started from there. And I remember when we were doing the research, Bonnie Three Irons was found dead on the Crow Reservation, under really mysterious circumstances. And
Mhm.
we're like, this is like a continuous, ongoing, growing crisis. And I think that really kind of catapulted our work. Was I remember we did an interview with NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt, and the people who actually interviewed us were like, you Google MMIW documentary, and your guys' work is the kind of only work that popped up for the longest time. And I also think the film Wind River was was a really big starting point for a lot of people. A lot of the
That was
people learned about the
incredible.
crisis. Yeah. A lot of the people learned about the crisis through that, and of course, there was that ability to provide Indigenous perspectives, and it was just we were very aware of, like, this crisis is happening and it's ongoing. And I think many people kind of think it has this really recent modern context, which it does. But the violence and trafficking and sexual violence that Indigenous women are facing, has been since the beginning of colonization. I mean, in Sarah Deer's book, The Beginning and End of Rape: Confronting Sexual Violence in Indian Country, she has firsthand accounts from some of the people involved with the Spanish conquest, and the violence that they subjected the Carib women to. So this is kind of this problem kind of has continued on a historical continuum, and continues to this day.
It is a national crisis for sure. I was astonished to read that um, the I had just said the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women USA Facebook page just recent Sunday issued an alert for Billings, and Billings is the highest is a hotspot for human trafficking in Montana,
Yep.
and they had said several women were being trafficked there in recent weeks. I think in the last 2 weeks, 3 minors
were brought to safety in Billings, and they reported that some of these girls were being kept in tents. They have very traumatic stories, and people, I think that those kinds of stories need to be told like you are telling them, like you and your sister are telling them in a very creative way, in a very honest way too. There's no way else to tell it. That is reality. That is indigenous reality, especially here in Montana, but nationwide. I know that like approximately 4,000 uh, let's see, murdered and missing Indigenous women cases nationally are reported, but at that more than half of those are human trafficking or sex trafficking, being sex trafficked. What would you say the statistics are for Montana?
No, I just want to say really briefly that MMIW USA does amazing work. I've known Deborah for years at this point. She's the director of it. She just most recently helped with an MMIW family in Crow with some support they were needing, and she was incredible. And yeah, they do a lot of outreach and work. And I had told Deborah I've been staying in Billings for the majority of the pandemic, and if she ever needs any assistance there. But yeah, I think that's one of the harder things, and why this crisis has been kind of so in the shadows is that conceptually, um, there's not much data. Data hasn't really been tracked up until the last few years. I mean, I remember when Anita Lucchesi at the Sovereign Bodies Institute started her database. I remember when it was on Tumblr, I think, in something, a project she started there, which I feel is probably the most comprehensive database related to MMIW statistics. And I think in the similarity, with human trafficking, I think that they're both two very distinct issues, but that overlap. And most of the cases I'm aware of related to MMIW and human trafficking are in that similar vein. Like, the most recently with the girl, she was from Fort Peck, if I remember. I think she was only around 15. She somehow ended up in Billings. There was rumors that she was being kept in a tent in Billings. And, that was an instance where apparently it was her boyfriend or someone that she was involved with um, who had did that to her. And so, I think that for me, it's always kind of hard to give like really cold hard stats of this is the exact number, this is the whole picture. So I rely a lot on like anecdotal data, or which something as an Indigenous person you just kind of have to rely on. So I did some work with the Missoula Human Trafficking Task Force, which is in Missoula County, and yeah, I know they get a few cases a year out of the human trafficking, sex trafficking cases that they have that are Indigenous. But I think that's also one of the harder things to track. I found in some of my research that often if these victims are found or recovered or reported missing, that and this is across the board, with data collection related to crime statistics, oftentimes ethnicity isn't accurately recorded, someone's heritage. There's an instance with a big police department in the Pacific Northwest who was trying to do like, I guess, like an audit of their data, and found that they weren't able to give accurate numbers related to missing Indigenous women, because up until I think it was something like the 90s, late 90s, they were categorizing Black and Native women with an N. And and again, and even in twofold, like the erasure of Indigenous people within crucial data. And so I do feel strongly that it is an issue in Montana, and it is something that's happening. I just don't know if I could really give like really accurate reflective stats of that.
That makes sense. I know that just recently, I think was it in October, there's a task force specifically for created for cold cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Um, what's it? Operation Lady Justice Task Force, I think it was called. It is called. Um, when they when I know that there's what is there also the Montana Missing Montana Missing Indigenous Persons Task Force, and I was wondering if law enforcement participates with that task force, considering that the fact that that is Indigenous led.
Yeah.
Do you know?
I do know that there is some cross collaboration between them. Um, so last legislative session, there was some specific bills passed related to the missing and murdered Indigenous woman, missing and murdered Indigenous person crisis. One of the big ones was Hannah's Act, which was tasked with it created a
Yeah.
position within the Montana Department of Justice related to missing persons cases, and someone who would coordinate with families, particularly Indigenous families. And there was some other specific things. So there was the looping in Native communities, and then there was the missing and murdered Indigenous person. It was like a task force, which I think recently Ellie Bundy from the Confederated Salish Kootenai tribe was just named the head of. And yeah, I do know that there is. I think since they're under the Department of Justice, and just with the issues related to jurisdiction in tribal communities, I think that they are under the purview of the FBI and the Department of Justice.
I was wondering because you are a part, you're deeply a part of this particular crisis that is going on. Not only because of your position in Montana Racial Equity Project, but because that is what you do. You are also Indigenous, and so you can't help but be involved, especially if it touches you personally, and for Ashley's sake. And that. So, considering all of that, how would you advise people, not only in Montana but nationally, to become more aware of the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in their own states, in their own towns, or advocate for them? What would you suggest?
Yeah, I think it takes a little bit of research. So with what my sister and I just started out as, a lot of it was just, discussing it with people. We do a lot of, I think social media has played a big part in the sort of proliferation of a lot of the missing persons flyers, sort of reignition of certain cases and sort of focus on that and kind of pressuring FBI. I know that there was some even instance where I think the local medias like Billings, Missoula, Helena, Great Falls, I think they've gotten a lot better to this point. But I remember when it was first starting out, and there would be a few of us sending continuous emails and messages like, "Hey, can you cover this case? Can you highlight this? This young girl, she went missing here or in your area." And we always tell people, like, if anything, share, attend rallies, figure out what's happening in your own community. I'm happy to report that a lot of the Indigenous communities that we're aware of have taken up a lot of these efforts, and that a lot of this original work is centered in grassroots, and there's always something happening. And a big thing, I think for me, a big thing we've gotten to the point, where a big thing we try to find any support we can for families. So whether it's monetary, we've been on a ton of searches with Ashley Lauren Heavywinter's family, but we've been on searches with Jermaine Charlo's family, who's missing out of Missoula. And we're always Ivy and I always talk about, we're kind of at this point, like, how do we always get resources for families who often don't have them? So, money, donations. One of the big things that we did when we did the ESPN short was, okay, well, how does this benefit the community? How does this benefit these families? So a big thing was creating GoFundMe's for Ashley's family, and then the Blackfeet Boxing Club, which was involved in the short. And so, it's always sort of it has to be really family and survivor and person centered. And we always think that's a big important thing with the advocacy.
Yeah, when you talk about grassroots, that is what grassroots advocacy is. And thank you so much for letting me know, letting anyone else who's watching this, thank you, know and understand what to do and how to do it. I don't want to keep up much of your time. Is there anything else you find really important that we haven't covered yet in this video that you would really like to
Yeah,
share?
yeah. I think it's just important to note that and the most recently. So I just did an interview. If you are interested in our work, you can follow our work at whentheywerehere.com. When they were here on Facebook and Instagram, I just recently did a talk with Shelley Fyant, the chairwoman of the CSKT tribe, on their community-led efforts, and they're sort of head, or, heading up this first in the nation pilot program related to missing and murdered Indigenous people, and they're developing protocols and resources and just ways to address this crisis. So, there's always something in communities, whether it's local human trafficking task forces, whether it's local groups doing, some groups even do like come get together and do like an honoring ceremony. We've done that a few times, and maybe if you are interested in learning more, just kind of looking up those avenues and kind of trying to find um, what's happening in your community, because at the end of the day, we tell people, as much as there is this focus from federal government, state government, and local government, it's really the communities who have been leading this work up to this point.
Thank you so much for your time. I think you're amazing.
Of course.
And please make sure project, right? Are you there?
So what was that?
Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry, I guess we had a bad connection, but just really quickly before we go, I just really wanted to advocate for you and Ivy's film, which people can look for on Facebook itself or go online, and it's called whenwewerehere.com.
Whentheywerehere.com.
Whentheywerehere.com. I look forward to watching it, and Ivan, again, I think you're amazing, and thank you so much for your time and educating us more about this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was so good to see you, Hisheeyas. I hope you're doing well and staying safe.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I guess we'll see each other soon, I hope.
Hopefully, yeah. Hoping, fingers crossed, vaccine soon.
Yeah, right. Well, I want to wish you a Merry Christmas. You deserve
have a good holiday.
Yes, and be safe, okay?
And congrats.
Thank you.
I've been following some of your news and what's related to school, so congrats on all that.
Thank you. I have more to tell you, but that'll be later.
For sure.
Thank you, Ivan. Take care.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.